Today, South Africa is going through multiple crises. We have got so many problems that we cannot even begin to list and put on a list and say, okay, we've got this one and that and that and that one and that one. We've got a tsunami of problems. And all of those problems have got to do with leadership or lack of leadership thereof. We've got very high unemployment, reaching about over 40%. We've got debt that's choking us, over 70% of debt to GDP in this country. We've got rampant corruption. We have got crime all over the country. We've got a crisis of infrastructure. We've got every other crisis that you can think of as a country. Now, the question is, who's to blame? Who did this to us? Who can we point a finger to and say, this one is the one that messed us up? Well, Thabo Mbeki answers that question. However, what he says is the cause of all of this may not be something that you were expecting. According to Thabo Mbeki, he says all of these problems and all of this crisis that we have in the country is due to spies or agents of the previous regime of apartheid. Thabo Mbeki is reviving that. And he says, I can tell you who exactly came to destroy this country. He says, I know even a time when they came and when they started to do the work of the apartheid government as the agents of the apartheid government. And he says those individuals are in the ANC. I want us to listen to Thabo Mbeki as he speaks about this matter so that we can look into it and see, is it really that the apartheid government is the one that's sabotaging us from the grave back then in 1994? About 30 years ago, we thought we buried apartheid. But Thabo Mbeki says, no, apartheid is the one that's really pulling the shots today. Let's listen to Thabo Mbeki so that we can talk about this.
These conservatives, it's scary, President. They then make a projection. They say, had the economy grew in the way it did, GDP per capita would be here. Had it done this, these fixed investment ratio to the GDP would be here. They show you where you would be now had the fundamentals been put in place that were coming along that 15 years. How would you explain a leadership that wants to look at that with a sense of amnesia or decided amnesia? Why do they behave like that?
I think, Mushin, in a sense, we're afraid to tell the truth. The truth is this phrase that Foster used, too ghastly to contemplate. The change that happened with the ANC leadership in 2007 was real change. It put in place in the leadership of the ANC people who were not ANC, were afraid to tell that truth. You have this ANC led by people who are wearing ANC t-shirts, but they are not ANC. The way it happened was because there was a very, very systematic program on the part of the apartheid regime in its own defense to infiltrate the ANC and the rest of the liberation movement. Very, very heavy infiltration. Yeah. As the ANC, we had all of the machineries. Let's check everybody who's joining and that. That was done. And some people were found and said, no, you can't belong among us. But there are many people who missed out. And some of them became part of the national leadership with the ANC in 2007. I'm talking about agents of the old regime. We're afraid to tell that truth. So this person who's wearing an ANC t-shirt, who's carrying a big ANC title, is not the ANC. This is a person who was infiltrated by the old order into the ANC, but now occupies a senior position in the ANC. And what's their task? The task is to repeat what their handler tells them to repeat. So you and I get surprised. It would be very, very logical, it's obvious, for the current ANC leadership to say, this is how well we did, until somebody else intervened to negate what we're doing. So the population will say, now we understand why things have gone wrong. We've been blaming you all the time. That's you and I think that would be the logical thing to do. But it doesn't happen. How do you explain it? I'm saying the way to explain it is if we lose this fear of telling the truth, to say the people who are not behaving logically, who are not saying, I did a good thing yesterday, and I would have done a good thing today, except that somebody else intervened to sabotage. He doesn't say that, and allows the blame to fall on himself. Or you are responsible for all of these bad things. Instead of saying, no, I'm not. They don't. And the reason they don't is because they belong among the bad people.
Maybe
That's
this
the truth. That's the truth, you see. And I'm saying it's difficult to say it. When we talk about counter-revolution, that, you know, from day one, from 1994, there are people from the old order who said, the ANC thinks it has won a war. It hasn't. In 1994, the ANC has won a battle, but we will win the war. And they intervened to make sure that they win the war. That's where we are today. The negatives that you see, as you say, that you have a certain period, first 15 years of our democracy, very positive. And the next 15 years, the opposite direction. Why? Why the sudden change? It's because the people were saying, the ANC thinks it has won the war, it hasn't. We will win the war. That's the result of that. To put in place your own people and put in place your own programs to make sure that this ANC, which they fought for 100 years, fails. And they are working together with their own people whom they had infiltrated into the ANC, who are now sitting in senior positions in the ANC. And you see it every day. You see it every day. You see, for instance, what's happened to the initiative for a national dialogue. Some people intervene to derail it because they don't want national dialogue to take place. Why? Who is this person who calls themselves progressive and doesn't want the ordinary people of South Africa to get together to say, we, the people, want South Africa to go this way? No, they don't want that. Who is this person? I'm saying it's a manifestation of the truth that we're afraid to tell. And I think it has to be told, and unfortunately, well, there's not enough people, I would say, maybe with the knowledge to kind of tell the truth that needs to be told. But it's a truth that needs to be told that the South Africans must understand what is the cause of this crisis in this country.
Well, Thabo Mbeki speaks about his time, of course, not in so many words. And he says, well, my time was good. And Nelson Mandela's time was great, of course. He is the one that's speaking. We can expect some bias from him. But if we were to look at it as South Africans, we can say relatively that there was very less problems during the time of Thabo Mbeki and Nelson Mandela. But was it because of the great things that they did? Was it because of the wonderful infrastructure that they built? Was it because of the systems that they set in place that made the country to work? That cannot be said, because from 1994 all the way to 2007, we had everything working from the apartheid government. We had the electricity, we had the roads, we had the lack of crime, we had the borders working, we had almost everything in place. So we cannot really entirely credit all of the good that we had from apartheid to 2007, or from 1994 to 2007, we cannot credit it to Thabo Mbeki per se. However, Thabo Mbeki says, well, even though my time was relatively good, something started in 2007. Remember that it was in 2007 when Thabo Mbeki was ousted as the ANC leader, when the ANC went to elect its new leader. And from 2008, we had Mohlante as the interim leader after Thabo Mbeki was ousted. But Thabo Mbeki here is telling us that there were agents of the apartheid government that started right then. He says at that time, the ANC was infiltrated by agents of apartheid. So who is he speaking about? From 2007, somewhere in 2008, Jacob Zuma came into the fray, being elected as the leader of the ANC, the president of the ANC. And then in 2009, Mohlante then stepped aside as the interim leader, and Jacob Zuma took over after the elections. Thabo Mbeki is telling us that the leader that was ushered in back then in 2009, or at least the caucus, the entire leadership that was there. He's not specifically saying, but when you listen to him, you can hear exactly what he's saying, because he's talking about the period of 2007 and the leaders that came from there. And that was Jacob Zuma. And he's saying that those leaders there were agents of the apartheid government. Is Thabo Mbeki telling us directly that Jacob Zuma was working for the apartheid government? Well, when we look at the era of Jacob Zuma, as we said that during Thabo Mbeki, there was relative calm, or there was the flow of calm from the apartheid government in terms of the economy, corruption in the country, debt to GDP, the workings of the country, the currency, and everything else. We can say that it was working just fine. So when Jacob Zuma took over in 2009, we can start to count to the point where things went wrong. The entire Zondo Commission told us exactly what went wrong. It told us from when the ANC, because that seems to be the first thing that the ANC did when Jacob Zuma came into power, they disbanded the Scorpions, which was the watchdog of the criminals and corrupt people in this country. They disbanded that, and from then, we started to see corruption start to eat our country away. But that, to us, is just corruption. We have seen people being corrupt and stealing money and filling their pockets. And from there, it continued. And it's still continuing, even after Cyril Ramaphosa took over in 2018. It's still continuing to this day. 6 years of Cyril Ramaphosa, to this day, corruption and wrongdoing is still continuing. And Thabo Mbeki is telling us the whole reason why this thing is going on is because the leaders are agents of the apartheid government. He says that these problems that we are experiencing are by design, because these agents of apartheid want to collapse the state. That is what he's saying. Let's look at the merits and the demerits of what he's saying. Is it true that these people are corrupt because of apartheid? Are they filling the pockets of apartheid when they steal the money? Or is it somebody just went and opened the floodgates of corruption in order to collapse the state? That could be true. Because, of course, the floodgates of corruption were opened and the state is collapsing. Thabo Mbeki is telling us that all of this is happening because these people are agents of apartheid. And apartheid is the one that's doing this. They're leading our leaders to be corrupt. They're leading our leaders to steal from their own people, to steal from their own country and destroy their own country through corruption. All of that, Thabo Mbeki says, is due to apartheid. But is it really? Because to me, I think it's the ANC. The ANC itself has lost its own course. And I think by saying this, Thabo Mbeki is kind of like absolving the ANC from the responsibility that it's supposed to take upon itself, that its leaders are corrupt. Because if the ANC itself was not corrupt, it would have taken charge and fixed this problem. It would have held its own leaders who are corrupt to account. We have seen the entire ANC rally around its own corrupt leaders, and they protected them. So if you want to say that the apartheid government infiltrated the ANC and has got some leaders to do their bidding, then you can say the entire ANC is therefore bought, because it is the entire ANC that's actually doing this. Was it just Jacob Zuma that disbanded the Scorpions? Was it just Jacob Zuma that was working with the Guptas and doing all the corruption in the country? No, it was not. Jacob Zuma had his role to play, but the entire ANC was actually involved. So if Thabo Mbeki wants to say that the apartheid government had a hand or is having a hand in what is happening in the country, then he should say that the ANC is bought, instead of saying that a few individuals are bought. Because if a few individuals were bought, we would have said, well, Jacob Zuma is gone, now we'd have some good governance. But no, we haven't. Things are getting even worse and worse. We are getting revelations and revelations of more and more corruption. Are you saying all of this is being done by the apartheid government? I think people need to take responsibility. People need to take responsibility. You cannot keep blaming somebody else for the things that you do. It was the hands of the ANC that was stealing. It was the ANC that was destroying. It was the ANC that was doing all this mess that we are in today. We cannot absolve the ANC and say it's some evil hand that is invincible from the apartheid graves. It cannot be. It definitely is not something that we can accept and say, well, the ANC didn't do this, the apartheid government did it. The ANC needs to take responsibility. So Thabo Mbeki on this one is not entirely correct. Even if somebody wishes to destroy you, they cannot destroy you until you destroy yourself. And speaking about the ANC being corrupt, the ANC was corrupt from 1992. It was not something that they started today. The corruption of the ANC started with BEE, which was a bribery from the businesses that were operating during apartheid. The big businesses like Shell and all the others that were operating during apartheid and making a lot of money from the backs of the poor black people and paying them nothing or close to nothing. They were the ones that went and bought the ANC in 1994. And they said that we will give you what is called BEE. You will have shares in our companies, and we don't have to pay the people back all the money that we exploited from them, using them to make the billions without them getting a share. The ANC agreed and took the deal. That's why today ANC leaders are rich and everybody else is poor. So the corruption of the ANC started a long time ago. And everyone in the ANC has a hand in it. And they have agreed and continued to nurse the corruption to this day. So without due respect to Thabo Mbeki, I disagree with what he's saying. The ANC itself should take responsibility for what they did to this country. And all of them were involved, and they did this. Well, this will be the end of this segment. And if you made it to this point, thank you very much. Please remember to like and subscribe.